So over the course of this Six Nations, it feels like Scotland and England have slowly just gone like this. And I don't just mean in where they finally finished in the table, with England third and Scotland fourth. It feels like more widely in terms of the direction that these two teams are heading, maybe in opposite directions at the moment. Welcome back to the channel. Yesterday I did my review of the Six Nations for Ireland and for France, so do go and check that out if you haven't seen it already. Today it is about England and Scotland, the two great rivals. So welcome back. Let me know what you make of these two teams, where they are at the moment off the back of their performances in the Six Nations, and where you think they are heading as we look into the rest of 2024, the various summer tours they have, and everything else. And also, if you feel like it, then like the video, that just gives it a little boost. And also, make sure you're subscribed to the channel as well. So let's get into it. I mean, these are clearly, you can completely understand why there is a feeling that these two sides are heading in different directions, as I say, despite the fact that Scotland beat England in this Six Nations. A fourth victory in a row. The Calcutta Cup, their grip on that rivalry is pretty fierce at the moment. But despite that, there's a very different narrative around these two teams, really. I'll start off with England, and from an England point of view, because there has been undeniable improvement, not just in terms of wins. They've won 3 wins for the first time since 2020, but I think in the style of rugby and the attacking intent of this team. And England fans, understandably, will feel really positive about the future, because for years, the last 2 or 3 years under Eddie Jones, the last 3 years under Eddie Jones really, following the 2019 World Cup, plus last year as well, the first year of Borthwick, they were watching a team who maybe got wins here and there, but certainly were not attacking with any sort of venom, with any sort of intent. They didn't look particularly threatening, and they didn't look like they were able to get anywhere close to some of the top teams in the world, with the exception of the World Cup semi-final against the Springboks. I suppose they had the draw against New Zealand at Twickenham in that time towards the end of the Eddie Jones era as well. But generally speaking, across the whole body of work, it was a fan base that had seen a team not produce all that much, even though under Eddie Jones, they were told that it's coming, we're going to get there, and they never did. This is the first time, I think, in 4 years that England fans have evidence in front of them that it is coming, that this team is improving, that they are playing a different, more exciting, attacking style of rugby. And that is why there's a lot of positivity about where they are heading. Now, I don't think they're the finished article yet. I actually thought we saw that in some regards in the game against France, the way in which France were able to put pressure on England, some of the tries they scored. I think off turnover ball throughout this Six Nations, England have looked vulnerable. Yes, the blitz defence is clearly something they're working on, and when they get it right, that's looked really, really positive. But the defeat against Scotland, for example, the moments in the game against France, turnover ball, I think, is where they, defensively at least, don't quite look as comfortable, and that's where teams are able to get at them at the moment. So there are areas to improve, obviously. In one Six Nations, they weren't going to go from where they were to all of a sudden being the best team in the world. It is a process, but they're on that process, and the fans can buy into that. The other thing with this England team, off the back of this Six Nations and looking ahead to the summer, I'm really intrigued in their summer tour. So they've got the Test match against Japan, and then they've got the 2 Test matches against the All Blacks. And I'm so interested to see where they are come that tour. It's been the complaint of England coaches for a long, long time of access to players, in that they work really hard in this 8-week camp to get themselves to a certain point, and then all the players go back to their clubs. England have no control over them. It's obviously all to do with the structure of the game in the country. So what sort of team they look like on the summer tour, in particular some of those elements, the blitz defence, their attacking shape, that is going to be fascinating, and that is a tour that won't be easy. Yes, you would back them to beat Japan, but 2 tests against the All Blacks, at this moment in time, it would be difficult to see England winning them. I think you could see them troubling them, and that maybe, particularly in these last 2 games in this Six Nations, with the way in which, against Ireland and France, the 2 top teams, they beat Ireland and they were able to really trouble France. It seems like they are starting to close that gap. How small or big is that gap going to be when we get to the summer? In terms of individual players, It wasn't that long ago that I was looking at the England second row and thinking, outside of Itoje, what are the options there? Who should it be? I think Ollie Chesham continues to grow into an international calibre second row. George Martin is the same. A bit quieter against France, George Martin, but in a fairly small sample size of his international appearances so far in his career, we clearly see a guy that has the potential to have a big impact on games. So I think those guys are really pleasing. Furbank, in terms of adding depth at fullback, this was the Six Nations where George Furbank looked like an international calibre player. He'd previously been thrown into international games, some really tough fixtures, and it never quite looked like he was fully comfortable in them. I think he has spoken previously about not quite being ready for that opportunity. This, for me, was the Six Nations that he looks like a really, really good option. And actually, you look at Freddie Stewart and George Furbank now as the options for England, you've got almost all bases covered in terms of what they bring. It just depends on the style of play. So I think that's a massive positive. And we've got to mention Ben Earl. Is Ben Earl the player of the Six Nations? Genuinely. I might do a video on this towards the end of the week of who's the player of the Six Nations. I think there is a brilliant case that it is Ben Earl. Even though England finished third, and naturally you would say it should go to an Irish player for them winning the title, or a French player, but I think Ben Earl has been outstanding. He's been brilliant for England in all of their games. In terms of the metres he's making, the tackles he's breaking, he is far and above any other back row player. And in some cases, he's far and above other players across all positions. So he is just an absolute gem for England at the moment. Some questions, though, I'll get on to Scotland. Some questions for England moving forward. I say about the summer tour. I think in terms of personnel, the big question for me still in the centre, is there a way that they can get Ollie Lawrence to 13 and who then plays 12? The 12 jersey is still an issue for England. Ollie Lawrence, I think, is best at 13. Still has had some good performances for England at 12. We saw that against Ireland. But I'd love to see if they can find a way to find a viable option at 12 so that he's then playing 13. And then development of the front row. We don't know how much longer Dan Cole and Joe Marler will be available, maybe towards the end of this year. And the good thing is the England under-20s with that front five have been awesome in the under-20 Six Nations. There are players there I think we might see potentially go on the summer tour or be selected for the A team that start to get transitioned into the senior setup. So that is an area that will need development. But it looks like there are maybe options there for England. So generally, you can understand, I think, why there is a positivity about where England are right at this moment in time. Let's get on to Scotland. So 2 wins for the Scots, which is obviously a backward step. I also think in any moment like this, and I myself have been critical of the Scots, I will ask a lot of questions about them in this little bit in this video. I think we have to give them credit, and maybe credit's the wrong word because they've had credit before. We need to have an appreciation for what this Scotland team has done, in that you look over the course of the history of the Six Nations and it has pretty much always been Italy and Scotland sharing the wooden spoon. There's been a few other teams, Wales, I think France got it once, a couple of others that sometimes have picked up the wooden spoon, but generally speaking, Scotland were always at the bottom of the championship. And over the last 5 or 6 years, that hasn't been the case. And there should be an appreciation of what this group of players and what Gregor Townsend and those coaches have been able to do in terms of the expectations on this Scotland team are completely different, in that we're now looking at a Six Nations where they only win 2 games, and it is maybe not quite crisis, but it is all a bit doom and gloom in terms of the narrative around the team. And that is because of the standards they have set in terms of beating England home and away, winning at Twickenham, winning in France, winning in Cardiff. They have ticked off a number of different milestones. But despite all that, there is doom and gloom. And there is this question mark, I think, of is the time frame for this group of players either at an end or reaching an end for them to genuinely win something? And I can understand why there are those questions and why maybe Scotland fans are looking at it and thinking, do you know what, they've done brilliantly, but they're just never going to be the guys to actually win a Six Nations title. I guess my question with that is that fair? Like, is that fair on this Scotland team? On the one hand, it is, because as brilliant as they've been and some of the great results they've had, there seems to be this sort of mental fragility. They switch off in games. They allow teams back into games. You can always rely on this team. I think, to have a bit of a blip and give you an opportunity, and then it's whether their opposition are able to capitalise on that. I do think actually the mental side of the game is something they can improve. Like, that is an area that I look at this Scotland team and I think there is issues there, but surely that's something that they should be able to fix. The wider question maybe is just in terms of pure quality, in terms of the front five of this team and whether they have the muscle up front. Some of the physicality, actually, this Six Nations has been really good. I thought they matched France pretty well, for example. So I don't know. I honestly don't know if it's the end of the road. I feel too harsh purely saying, nope, they're never going to win anything, because the Six Nations is a funny old competition. Momentum means a huge deal. If they start it well one year, then who knows? But you feel like it's a tall order for Scotland. I guess that's what I'm saying. And then naturally, it leads to questions about Gregor Townsend and his future. Not because, as I've said already, he hasn't done a brilliant job with this team, but because you get to the point and you think, how much further can he take them? I remember when he re-signed and he signed his new contract, I think I did a video on the channel then where I said Gregor Townsend has done a phenomenal job with this Scotland team, but it's time to move on, because I felt like they couldn't go any further ultimately, and I'm continuing to maybe feel that way. I think he's a really good coach and clearly a really decent bloke as well. But can he take this Scotland team much further? I think he'll be given time. I think the performance against Ireland in Dublin on the weekend will give him more time. And actually, I think, speaking of summer tours, it's a great summer tour for Scotland. Going to the Americas, playing teams from South America, playing the USA and Canada, that is a tour which will give him an opportunity to try and blood new players. It's not a tour where you have to play your first 15 the whole time, because otherwise you worry you're going to get absolutely spanked. It is a chance for them to rotate. It's actually it's a really well-timed tour, I think, from Scotland. In terms of the calibre of opposition, yes, they'll still have to turn up, but it does give them an opportunity, I think, to look at other options. And there are questions about the depth of that team. They've got loads of back rowers. Front row, particularly once you get past the starters, there are questions there. Even second row as well, I would say. So yeah, Scotland fans, where are you with them? I don't think they will win a Six Nations title, despite the fact that it is a funny old competition and you never know. But I think sometimes maybe you just got to appreciate what this team have done. And the history of Scottish rugby has not been a team that is winning Six Nations titles or competing with the best teams in the world. And actually the fact that this Scotland team has got to a point where the narrative is, they're never going to do it, that actually in itself is a mark of progress. That's probably where I am with them. Let me know. Scotland fans, let me know. England fans, also have your say in the comment section. Like the video, subscribe to the channel as well, and I'll see you in the next one.